My interest in healing began probably in my early 20s when I realized that I was pretty messed up and I needed to fix myself somehow. And a lot of that had to do with taking too much LSD, too much drugs, which, I actually got more into later in my 20s. But basically, I had a lot of anxiety and some physical problems sleeping, problems with my heart, not literally like going to the hospital and needing a operation kind of thing, but I really feel like it was more of a spiritual thing. I just had a very deep spiritual fear, and I think a lot of it was just personal emotional stuff that needed to be sorted out. But I think it was made worse by drugs. I was an atheist, and although I've always liked to think of myself as a spiritual person, but I wasn't a believer in God and in Jesus Christ until much more recently. But this journey of mine, this interest in healing, goes back quite a few years, and I've dabbled in all kinds of stuff, mostly self healing kind of stuff, reading books, meditation, a lot of stuff that would be called New Age, crystals, you know, colloidal silver, colloidal gold, alchemy. These are things some of you may have explored. But basically, I really wanted to get at the root of um, sort of self mastery, I guess, which sort of led me into the Crowley stuff because I felt the Aleister Crowley stuff and alchemy. I felt like this was kind of like the secret was somewhere in there. And without giving my whole life story, which I've given quite a bit of already in other blogs, um, there is something to the idea of just sort of acknowledging that you're ill and that you want to be better. I think that's a place to start that is productive, regardless of where you're coming from and what your spiritual beliefs are. I think that you just have to sort of acknowledge, like, I'm ill. This is a problem, and say it out loud, and just say, I want to be better. And that intent, that will to be better, is always a good starting point. And I think it requires you to be honest with yourself and truthful, and it gets you on a path to truth, which is a difficult path because you might start with being truthful about an illness or sickness, but then you go into other aspects of your life, relationships, people maybe even political things. And healing is something that I think we can all relate to. It's something that at some point in life we all need healing, whether it's going to a doctor, a psychiatrist. We've got more mentally ill people in this country than ever. I'm not going to sit here and throw out statistics, but if you look at statistics, we've got more autistic people than ever, way more, way more mental, way more physical illness, way more obesity than ever, and I think it comes down to a spiritual illness ultimately. And I think when we can consider that and take it seriously, we will find that there is something there. And I found this book, Divine Healing Made Simple, by this guy, Praying Medic. His name is actually Dave Hayes. That's his real name. And he was a big part of my journey to Christ. Another guy was Fritz Springmeier. Now, Fritz Springmeier, if you look him up, he deals in a lot more abstract stuff, a lot more, you could say, conspiracy stuff, mainly Illuminati. And I used to watch his lectures, before I was a Christian, when I was an atheist. And this guy, Fritz Springmeier, was very knowledgeable about the Illuminati and mind control and stuff. And I was just very impressed with the fact that he seemed to gain a lot of strength and he seemed to be able to help people through his faith. Now, I don't know if that's all true. I don't know if that guy's just a spook or something, Fritz Springmeier, but he was another person whose lectures really got me interested, paying attention to, okay, this whole believing in God thing, this whole Christian thing. I mean, and the idea of healing very damaged people with psychological demons. I found that interesting, something worth looking into. And I guess this is all just a very long-winded way of saying that I've come to prescribe to the idea that that we can heal, that we have the ability to heal ourselves and others. And I don't know that I would necessarily allocate that to something very specific like, cannabis or colloidal silver, colloidal gold, or supplements. Although I think these things are worth looking into, carefully, safely, responsibly, not just, oh, someone says this is healthy. Let me just shovel it in my cereal every morning for the next month, and next thing you know, your skin's blue or something like that. I believe in a very responsible, conservative approach, but remaining open to trying different things and seeing what works. But I think ultimately behind it is our will to get to be better, our will to be healed. And I do think I've had some moments reading this book, Divine Healing Made Simple, where I felt something. There's something real there, and so I would recommend people at least look into it, at least consider it, because you never know. Even if you think it's a bunch of mumbo jumbo, hey, I was one of those people, and I tried it, and there was something there. So this guy who wrote this book, Dave Hayes, he does a podcast. The second Saturday of every month, called Supernatural Saturday, and I like to watch it. And I've been meaning to actually. He does a question and answer thing, and I've been meaning to talk to him and ask him a couple of questions. So I actually did that, and I'm a little embarrassed about it because I don't really like the way I sound because I think I was too loud and it sounds like I have a lisp. So I feel like I sound really silly. But so I asked him a couple questions that I've been wanting to get his response to, and I'll play you the first one.
We have Joe Gilmore. Joe, if you can unmute yourself, what is on your mind this morning?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions, if that was okay. The first
Sure.
one, and this is something you may have talked about somewhere else, maybe I just didn't catch it, but I'm a fairly new Christian, and I was very fascinated and kind of unsure how to deal with the idea that traditional Jews don't acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah, and I find that, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to know, how would you articulate that conundrum? Like, are they still waiting? And what would you say to a traditional Jew? Like, what words would you use to sort of describe that to them? And would you try to encourage them to accept Christ?
Yeah, so they are. Those who practice Judaism, they don't believe Jesus is their Messiah. They believe the Messiah is coming. And that, if I understand it correctly, they believe that the Messiah is going to establish his kingdom, a physical kingdom on earth. So that's what they're waiting for. They don't see the messianic prophecies fulfilled in Jesus because he didn't reestablish, the things that are prophesied in the Old Testament, and that's understandable. The Pharisees did not see, like they read the scriptures, they knew the messianic prophecies. They didn't see those prophecies fulfilled when Christ came in the first century, right? They just didn't see it; they were blinded. So I think it is good to encourage people who practice Judaism to reconsider their perception. However, I think a really good way to witness to non-believers of all kinds is healing. Physical healing and emotional healing. Emotional healing in particular is really good because if you take somebody through emotional healing, you're literally introducing them to Jesus, who is going to heal their emotional trauma. And he does all the work. We don't have to do anything other than say, look, you have this emotionally traumatic event. Just take that emotion, take that pain, just say and give it to God and ask Him to take it away from you, and He will. And when they feel that difference, they're like, what just happened to me? Like that fear, the anxiety, the anger is gone. And you can say, oh, you just got healed by Jesus. I think healing is a really good way to witness to non-believers. That's my take.
Thank you. Yeah, that's something I've been working on. I've read a couple of your books, and I'm not quite there yet, but I know it comes down to faith. So I've just been trying to work a lot on my faith and building up my belief in the whole thing. Because if I don't believe it, how am I going to do it?
Well, hang on, real quick. So, physical healing and deliverance depends heavily on having a strong faith. Emotional healing does not. Because in emotional healing, Jesus is doing all the work. We simply ask the person, hey, recall this event, identify the emotion that you're feeling, ask Jesus to take that emotion from you and ask Him to heal the wound, right? And we just ask them to repeat the script. It doesn't take any faith on our part to do it. No faith is required to do it. Jesus is doing all the work. When it comes to physical healing, yes, faith is an important part. But for emotional healing, Jesus does everything. So just wanted to make that distinction.
I don't know how interested any of you are in that topic that was just discussed there, but I think it's important for everyone to be at least basically aware of the fact that Christianity, the Muslim religion, and traditional Judaism, they all spring forth from the same source. The Old Testament, the Muslim religion basically starts out with the Old Testament, but then branches off with Muhammad into its own direction. Christianity starts with the Old Testament, which is the traditional Jewish texts, but then continues on through Christ, whereas traditional Judaism goes off on its own to the present day. So the reason why I think this is important for people, even if you're not religious or whether you believe in God or not, when you look at the Middle East and all the turmoil there, I think it is important to at least have a basic understanding of this and to consider the spiritual implications of it all. Anyway, moving on to the topic of the Antichrist, which is something I've been talking about a lot lately, and my theory about the Antichrist being created through AI by man. I actually put this question to Dave, and here's what he said.
And if I could just ask one more question.
Yep.
I was just curious what your view is on the idea that the Antichrist will be birthed by AI. This is something this is a theory that I've been prescribing to myself. That these robots and the way man is trying to imitate human by using technology, and the way that the Antichrist is supposed to be the ultimate deceiver, I feel like a false human made by human beings that is telling everyone that it's human, it seems to me to be the most likely candidate for the Antichrist. So I don't know. I just was curious what your thoughts are on that whole topic.
Yeah, I have not thought about that. I have concerns about AI. Even the people who know a lot about AI, like Elon Musk, have warned us that if it's not tightly regulated, it could lead to the destruction of mankind. So I have concerns. I don't know about the Antichrist. I haven't thought about that.
Just about every religion I can think of has their sort of judgment day story, their description of how it's all going to end. And of course, in the Christian Bible, we have, Revelations and the second coming of Jesus. A friend of mine many years ago, actually my drummer in my band, my first band, had a very interesting perspective on the lyrics to Black Hole Sun. And it relates to the idea that many people sort of anticipate this event. We sort of feel that there's this inevitable disaster coming, the end of the world, or Ragnarok, as they would say in Norse mythology, this apocalypse. And he was sort of putting forth the idea that Black Hole Sun is about the anticipation of that, and almost desire to want to see it, like almost excitement about, like, oh, it's finally here. And the black hole sun is kind of like the metaphor for that event. I don't know. I thought that was one of the best explanations of the lyrics I've ever heard. Anyway, I was hoping Dave Hayes would go a little more into that than he did. But to be fair, he did say, it never really occurred to me that AI might be the coming of the Antichrist. Obviously, he wouldn't have had a lot to say about it off the cuff, having just been told that. But I don't know. I could be wrong. Who really knows? To call in and ask Dave a question, I had to download Telegram. So I thought I may as well close this out by just saying a few words about Telegram. It's actually my favorite social media platform, or whatever you call it. Maybe you wouldn't call it a social media platform. It's a messaging program, but whatever you call it, it's my favorite because it's the simplest, and it's just really cool. There's almost an old school, I don't know, like old school technology feel to it that I really like. However, I deleted my Telegram a couple of years ago because I heard people online complaining like, oh yeah, China's going to spy on you, this and that. And I got really paranoid and I deleted it. But, the fact is, all of these social media platforms, especially like Facebook and Instagram, whatever, I mean, they're all, taking our information, and who knows what they're doing with it, So there's a certain risk involved in all of these platforms. You can't really escape it unless you just, decline to participate completely. So I went ahead and went back on Telegram. So I'm on there. I don't know. I'll just keep using it until I feel paranoid again, want to delete it, I guess.